Well, good morning, everybody. It's good to see you. It's good to see familiar faces and some new faces. And we're really excited to be talking about digital ministry and specifically some things about websites with Christopher Harris from Faith Growth Incorporated. I will turn it over to you, sir.
All right. Well, we'll get started. Well, welcome. Thank you for being here this morning. So as a matter just kind of how we'll do this, I have a little presentation. We're going to talk about some of the important ways to engage with visitors on your website, and then we'll do a lot of Q&A. If at any time you have questions, you can go ahead and throw them in the chat, but we won't really get to them until the end. Or you can wait and save them up till the end when we get there. On the call from my team, we also have Virginia Woodbury, who some of y'all may know. She is, as she is a part of your Senate, and she'll be helping me monitor the chat and be bringing questions to me to answer. So that's just a little bit of logistics. Now let's get to the fun part. Y'all ready for that? So hi there, I'm Christopher Harris. And as Bob mentioned, I'm from Faith Growth at faithgrowth.com and the host of the How We Do Digital Ministry podcast. And at Faith Growth, we help churches share the gospel online. I want to thank y'all for having me here in the Southeastern Pennsylvania Synod. Such a great pleasure. I'm coming to you today from Dallas, Texas, from the Northern Texas, Northern Louisiana Synod, where I'm a member. A little bit about me before we dig into this. I've always been into computers since the early 80s. My mother was an engineer and brought computers into the house, or into my house when I was in the second grade. So it's something I've just done all of my life. And in college, I started serving the church as a youth minister, and I did that for about 12 years. And after my years in youth ministry, I went off to seminary. And basically in seminary, I got an MDiv and I learned how to code websites for churches, is my joke. But really what I did was I got an MDiv and learned a lot about, pastoral care, worship, and all the things that you normally learn. And when I came out of seminary, it was in 2008. And that is about the time, it was 07, 08, is when Facebook opened up from just college students to the rest of the world. And so when I came out of seminary is when I was really seeing, hey, this technology thing that I've always kind of done over here on the side is really becoming a huge deal for the way that we can communicate and a way that the church can share the gospel. And so instead of getting ordained and serving one church, I started a ministry called Faith Growth, where we help lots of churches learn what are best practices, how they can actually engage, do evangelism online, and a lot of the things that many of you have probably learned in the last year because of the pandemic. And a big key component that I love online so much is that my faith personally has grown through interactions online and through relationships with other people of faith and through churches that I interact with. And even during pandemic, I started attending a church 3,000 miles away from me. So I'm involved in a faith community in New York. And as I mentioned, I am in Dallas. So to me, this is very important that we as a church learn how to do digital ministry and do it well. So I'll tell you a little bit more about Faith Growth and some of the principles that we operate on. The first one is that digital ministry is incarnational. So if we as individuals of faith, as church leaders, if we're not online, then Christ is not online, because we bring the presence of Christ online in our interactions with other people. The second principle of Faith Growth is that we believe people online are yearning for community. Sometimes they do that in unhealthy ways, but by and large, people are online and interacting because they desire to connect. 3, we believe that churches that are growing have a strong online presence. 4, which I also think is a very important one, we want to get love to the top of Google, not toxic theology. And what I mean by that is if you go search certain terms about does God love me? Will God love me if I'm gay? We want to make sure that the loving presence, the all-encompassing love of God is presented in those results and not a narrow-minded, perhaps uninclusive image of God. So we want to make sure that we are helping to get love to the top of Google. And we want to remove the stress of technology to allow you, church leaders, to do ministry that you are called to do without all the stress and anxiety of the technology itself. So those are the principles that we kind of operate at Faith Growth. So now I want to turn it a little bit. You're here. Thank you for being here. But I would like to ask you a few questions and learn maybe why you decided to attend this workshop this morning. And so I'm going to ask about 5 questions and just put answers in the chat for me, and we'll kind of read them as they stream. Can y'all hear me now? Good. I see a thumbs up. Thank you. I don't know. It automatically muted me. Sorry about that. So you're here. Thank you. So I'm going to ask you a few questions to kind of get to know you a little bit. The first question that I always like to ask is, when it comes to digital ministry, what's the #1 most urgent thing you would like to fix? Let's see what some of your answers are to that. Getting better webcasting technology, how to get started, finding content, making our website more enticing, better broadband, bring people to our church website, creating a web team, better Facebook and web, website design for usability, helping others look at it is important, how to incorporate online service with bringing people back to the church, finding information in the midst of data, helping people born before 1945 understand. Understanding different needs possibilities for adults versus youth online. Good. Thank y'all for all those. Here's my second question. What's keeping you up at night these days when it comes to digital ministry? Oh, who's going to help out? That's a big one. If I don't do it, who will? We have the basic coverage, so no sleepless nights. That's important. Cycle online as well in person. Poor hardware with no resources to upgrade. Finance, ooh. Loss of service in the middle of worship, that is hard. Volunteer posting odd content. Ooh, gosh, that's no fun. Social media versus web-based ministry. That's interesting. How to transition to hybrid and how do we do simultaneous worship in person and online, engage both audiences. Oh man, these are all awesome. A couple more questions. What things are making you tired on a daily basis? This is also helpful for me, and it helps inform some of the examples I'll use later. Hours on Zoom, not having enough volunteers, managing the website solo, coming up, constantly rethinking how the church operates. What changes can you expect in the future, and what will it cost? Oh my. Wanting a fresh look and feel to reach the community. Relying on shaky volunteers. And that's pretty much what we just asked. So I'm going to skip that last one. If you have anything else as far as what's keeping you up at night, or anything, go ahead and keep adding those to the chat. And I'm going to kind of move us into what is our plan for the rest of our time together this morning. So we're going to do welcome and intros. Then I'm going to tell you a little bit about me, and then I'm going to ask you to share a little bit about me, yourselves, excuse me. So guess what? We get 3 check marks already. Check, check, check. We've done that. Then we're going to head into a little bit of shaping your church website. I'm going to give you some tips on shaping your church website to engage and connect with visitors. Then we'll have a Q&A and help you with any best practices that you might come out. So that is our plan. And so just got lost in my slides. So we're going to focus in on shaping your church website to engage and connect with visitors. I want you to know that this is one small piece of a bigger system that we have. I've intentionally hid the full name because later today we're actually announcing updates to this system. But I just want you to know that right now we're focusing on one small piece of the digital ministry plan that we teach, and that is the piece about your website. And we're going to talk first about the key pages that you should have on your website to focus on outward content. But before I do that, I want to say a little bit about the roles of a website, and then we'll get into these key pages. Your website, primarily what I find with church websites, they really focus mainly inward. And what I mean by that is they have all the calendar type content, news and announcements type content. And none of that is necessarily bad, but it's really focused for who is there. It's like we took the bulletin board out of the NorthX and we moved it into the cloud. And what I want to talk about today is not so much all of that content. I'm going to talk about what I call the outward focused content. How do we engage with potential visitors and really connect with them in ways that we start a relationship online and begin to nurture that relationship online. And over time, that relationship will deepen, and hopefully with the goal being that they might darken our door someday and come worship with us in person, if that is possible, if they're geographically close to where we are. So that's kind of the content I'm going to focus on today. Sound good? Give me a thumbs up in the chat if that sounds good. Someone? Anyone? Oh, yes. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Kim. All right, wonderful. So like I said, the key pages. And this is what I find very interesting is because I think, honestly, we can get it down to 3 pages these days. The big pages that I really will talk about are, we need a worship page. So how can they join you online right now? Literally, worship is a verb. Not here's how to get to worship. How do they worship with you right now? Because we're all broadcasting our services or we're putting recordings up, one of the two. So we want a worship page, and I'll talk more about that in a second. We want some type of invitational page on how they can take next steps. So I'll call it a next step page. And then the third page is, how can they connect with you? Maybe through an online welcome card or connection card. So to me, the 3 most important pages are that, hey, we have a first call to action. It's like, hey, I want you to worship with us. So you can check out our worship online. 2, here's the next steps that you can get involved with. Maybe there's a Zoom Bible study they could join. Maybe your church is a part of a food pantry. They could come and work or donate to financially. So we have some discipleship and we have some mission, but not all 100 things. I know your church does a ton of ministry, but I don't want 100 things there. I literally want like 2, one that's more discipleship focused and one that is more mission focused, because we don't want to give people decision paralysis. We want to give them easy, simple ways to make next steps. And then the third page is a connection card page. And what's so important about that is this is where we collect their email and learn a little bit about them and start a relationship with them through email. And I'll show you some examples of what I'm talking about in a minute. But those literally, if you have those 3 pages, and that's all you have across the top, and things like calendar and contact and all that, you can put those in the footer navigation. That's enough to really start connecting with visitors. And the reason that I say that it's as simple as 3 pages is, in the web world, there's a design book that we all read. when we're designing websites. And it's simply called Don't Make Me Think. Don't make me think. The problem with a lot of people when they're online is there's just so much information. And so we have to pare it back. And so your church website, I know you're proud of all the ministries and all the work you do, but it can't be an encyclopedia. It needs to just be enough information to start the relationship and then begin to nurture that relationship. And we have to trust and have faith in the fact that, hey, when we start the relationship, they will grow with us and they'll get to know more. And when they're in that new member class finally, that's when you can give them the encyclopedia. That's when you can give them that our church was founded in 1956 or 1883 or whenever you were founded, and these great saints helped do all this. But on the website, it's really, hey, we want you to worship with us. We want you to maybe take a next step, maybe join a Zoom Bible study, and then we'd like you to fill out our welcome card so we can get to know you a little bit more. So those are the key pages. If you were to add a couple other things, a couple other pages that, like those are the three you need, but there's a couple others that can be important. And if you have time to add more and work on them, they would be like an about page. And we'll talk a minute ago on writing content, how that about page should be written. A staff page, people like to know who are the leadership, what do they look like, what are they about. Maybe a visit page, but quite honestly, I don't know how much the visit pages are going to mean anymore now that we've moved everything online, because to me, the first invitation is to worship with us online, whereas a year ago, the first invitation was come visit us. And so in our follow-up communication from kind of the next steps and everything, that's where a visit might become now. So I don't know that it needs to be a top-level page anymore. But but you might want to keep it. And then if you have a very large, you might have some information about children's and youth programs or family ministry programs, if that applies to your church and what you have going on there. So when we're thinking about outward focused pages, we're just thinking about how can they kind of get to know us. And this is what's awesome. It's not about writing and it's not about showing off who you're not. It's about literally saying and living into God has called all the people of your congregation together to be the manifestation, to be the body of Christ in that place. And that's what you get to show off online. And that's what's so exciting, because God has brought y'all together. And by the sheer simple fact that God has brought y'all together, you're unique as that outpost of the body of Christ. And so what we're trying to do is give just a little bit of a flavor online of who you are so that you can invite others to start to join in that with you. All right. Make sense? Tell me, give me an amen if that's making sense in the chat. I'm looking at the chat. Ooh, we got some amens. Yes, yes, yes. Thank y'all so much. I appreciate that. All right, I'm going to take a sip of water because all this talking. All right, thank you. Okay, so step 2, now we know what the key pages are. What type of copy should be on those pages? And this is real important because we have a tendency to write sometimes in the third person. We have a tendency to get very formal, or we have a tendency to talk too much about ourselves. And so the way we want to write the copy for this is we want to write the copy in such a way that we're being true to ourselves, but we're being invitational. So we acknowledge that only one person is visiting the website at a time. So it's not like you're writing to a royal you or like a big group of people. You're literally writing for one person that'll be reading that page. And it's important not to talk about, hey, we got this, we're a great church, we're awesome. You want to talk to them, hey, you would have a home here. You would enjoy this welcoming church. We want to use the you language that invites them in, that we know that, hey, you're reading this page and we're talking straight to you. And so the focus is on the you language. And then as we're telling our story, like for instance, on an about page, it's not like we were founded in 1992. It's maybe like a formula similar to this. It's like, God has brought some, a while back, God brought some people together, and, St. John's Lutheran Church was founded. Um, and, and it was founded because they thought this mission or insert study was very important. And so now and then the next thing is we live that out today, and we're still doing it. And then kind of the third thing is this is where we feel we're called in the future, and we want you to come join us. So it's not like this historical timeline. It's more like, here's what God was doing, and that's how we came about. We still live it out this way today, and this is where we're headed, and we'd like you to come join us. And so it's very much how are you looking at the bigger picture, inviting the reader of your website into that, helping them see themselves in your story if they can. So you're presenting yourself, but you're presenting yourself in such a way that the reader can see themselves in the story. And that's true for all of your copy on your website. And we want to keep it very, the tone, I would say, keep it the similar tone of your church. I would say a little bit less formal, unless your church is extremely formal, then make it very formal. But I think most of us are pretty, how would you have a casual conversation during coffee hour? That is probably the tone that you should be on your website. And so as you're writing those pages, and after this, we'll send out, I have a worksheet on writing copy for your page, for your website that has some instructions. I'll make that available to y'all after this workshop. We'll send out some links. It's a Google Doc that you can all download. And I'll give that to Bob, and he can send it out to you, but we'll give you a worksheet to kind of, what should be on the worship page, what should be on the visit page, what should be on the about page, what should be on the staff page, and to help you do that. But the keys are that we're writing, for that one person, we're doing it more conversationally, and we're not giving them an encyclopedia, but we're giving them just enough so that they can take that next step and, worship online with us, fill out the welcome card, and maybe after they've done that, take the next step of maybe joining a Zoom Bible study. So you notice that everything I'm saying is like the relationship is starting online now, and I'm helping you to design your website to start the relationship online. Whereas pre-COVID, the relationship started, it was always about come visit, and the moment they walked in the door and you shook their hand is when the relationship started. And now we're saying, hey, we can back it up months, and the relationship can start much earlier. Doesn't mean they're going to show up next Sunday. We find that a lot of times online, when somebody starts investigating something, it can easily be 12 to 18 months before they execute on that. So they might consider, start checking you out months ahead of time before they come in person. So just bear that in mind. This is this content that I'm telling you to create that's outward focused. It's not like, hey, put it here this week and you're going to see an increase this Sunday. It's more for a longer process. And what I think is unique about that is before we only knew of the people that showed up on a Sunday morning to visit that might be interested. And if we look at the statistics of kind of how people engage online and make decisions, whether it be purchasing or other organizations they want to be a part of online, we know that typically about 50% that check us out probably are just not a good fit. Maybe they are looking for a Baptist church and you're a Lutheran church, or, maybe the time's not right, or, you're in the wrong city or whatever. But then there's the next 50%. And of those, 2 to 3% are ready to kind of make a decision to maybe visit or do some type of action right now. The next 7% are ready to make an action in the next 30 days. So then that leaves 40%. And those people are ready to take an action like, hey, go visit, and it will take them 12 to 18 months to do that. And so what's interesting is before, when someone actually showed up on a Sunday morning as a visitor, they were that 2 to 3%, and that's all we ever knew about. And now, when we start the relationship earlier online, we're able to capture that next 47% and start nurturing that relationship and begin a relationship with them. And that was not possible before. We didn't know who those people were. And to me, that's what's really exciting about when we start focusing on our outward focused content, we start collecting their emails, and we start getting into an online relationship with them. All right. So step 2B, photos. There is a good song that we sing that's in our hymnal we sing it all the time. The church is not a building. The church is the people. That's what our website should be full of, is your people doing the ministry that God has called them to do. So pictures of worship, pictures of study, pictures, and right now, if only pictures you have are Zoom worship, those are fine. But pictures of your people doing ministry, mission, mission, ministry, worship, and all of those type of things. Those are the pictures we want to highlight. We want big smiling faces. We want people living out the faith together. And the reason that we want that is we want, as people are looking at your website, you know, if we have they kind of start to put themselves into the story, put themselves into the picture. And so if they can kind of start seeing, oh yeah, I'd like to do service like that. I like to do worship. They start seeing that, then they kind of start putting themselves into the photo. If we just have like, hey, there's this picture of your building from the road, and it might be a pretty building, but there's no people, there's nothing going on. It's hard for me to envision myself a part of that story because it's just a building. So photos are very important, and it really comes about people. And what I would suggest that you do is, you're always going to need photos from Facebook to your website to whatever, is I would get Dropbox or Google Drive or some type of shared drive system, and I would create some folders, like a worship folder, a music folder, education folder, fellowship or people, youth, children, mission, you know, the kind of the key areas. And then I would just constantly be uploading photos there, and then, you know, there's probably 2 or 3 shutterbugs in your congregation. Give them access to it as well, and let them just always be uploading photos to the different categories, so you have different photos to choose from for Facebook or for your website or things like that, because you also kind of want fresh photos. But you really, the key is that you want the photos that are really capturing the essence of who you are as a congregation, doing the mission and the ministry that God has called you to do in your place, in your congregation. So photos are highly important. And so then, as those pages that I was talking about, each one of those pages should be full of photos, but as you're telling that story with words, we insert the photos in there to help paint even a bigger picture. So as we're talking about worship, and hey, you're here for worship, we have photos of worship, maybe a photo of a baptism, maybe, you know, we put in photos. All right, I will say, I'm seeing a couple of y'all sending me direct messages, and I would encourage you to make your comments to the whole group so that Virginia can see them, because I might miss them as direct messages, because Virginia is kind of keeping track of questions and is going to help lead the Q&A later. So just know, if you DM'd me, I might have saw it, I might not have saw it. And if you want to make sure that we get to it in the Q&A, add it to the general group. Thanks. All right, step 3. This is the fun step. You know, you all are familiar with some type of pew pad or pew card or welcome card or something like that, where you collect information. Now that we're doing so much online, I think it's important that we start collecting information online. And, you know, we get their, oh, Virginia just said you can DM her messages if you'd prefer them not seen by the whole group, which that's a good idea as well. Thank you, Virginia. All right. So the welcome card is how we collect some information online and start a relationship. And it's a good way that you can, you know, email that. They'll give you a little bit of information. You can email them and start giving them a little bit more information about the church. If you find out, hey, they have a family, this is a good time to start telling them, here's some of the family ministries we have. You know, and the one thing is not think about it as one email. Think about it as, this is how we're beginning a relationship. And so I would think about it as like, you want a 3 or 4 email sequence ready to go over the next several weeks. And then, you know, Also, and then putting on your calendar that like every month to 6 weeks, you're just checking back in with them. How is it going? Are you still attending online worship with us? Is there any needs? Is there any prayer requests? Is there any, basic pastoral care questions? But that is how you nurture and move the relationship along. Just like if they were showing up on a Sunday morning, the way to think about it is if they were showing up on a Sunday morning, you might have an opportunity to have that conversation at the back of the sanctuary when you're shaking hands and things like that. So what we want to do is I want you to be following up every 4 to 6 weeks with the similar type questions you might ask in that situation when you were shaking hands. And then that's how you're going to move that relationship along forward and forward to the point that, A, they might even say, can I join the church online? Or B, they might come and show up on a Sunday morning. But it's through the welcome card, and it's through always encouraging them to fill it out on the website, saying, hey, fill out the welcome card. Or when you're doing online worship, check out the welcome card, links to the welcome card. It's always about, hey, this is our big thing we want you to do, is the welcome card. Like, this is the big initial call to action. I want you to complete the welcome card. We ask always, often, and a lot of times. And you should know that right now, usually before people take action, they've had to have about 27 touch points. So that's where I'm saying, like I said earlier, 12 to 18 months. And now we find that before people take action, a lot of times it's 27 touch points. So this helps us start those initial touch points. And that's where I'm saying that follow-up every 4 to 6 weeks is really important, because you're going to need to do it up to 27 times. And so that's why the welcome card is so important. I'm going to show you a quick example of kind of a website that I think, well, I have some critiques of this website, but whoops, that's not what I wanted to do. All right, so this is Advent Lutheran in New York City. What I kind of do like is they have join us is where their worship is. I don't like the big drop downs. I'd make it a little bit more simple, but I just want to say they do kind of have the about that we were talking about. Join us, which is here's where Sunday worship is, inviting you to a small group, a food ministry, and they have family information. Next steps, this is where you can get more involved. And then here's the welcome card that I was talking about, and that's even theirs. And so they asked two things. They asked name, email, and then phone number optional if you maybe want to text or call them. But when you submit this, there's a couple other questions that come up that help you get to know them a little bit better. Like, hey, do you have a family? Would you be interested in learning about our family ministries? Do you have any pastoral concerns right now? Would you like a pastor to contact you? Is there anything we can pray for you for? Just a couple little questions to get to know them a little bit better, not too much. You put too much, they won't fill it out. But the key thing is getting that email address. And then as soon as you submit it, it'd be nice that they get an email back in a day or two from maybe, if not the pastor or other church leader, maybe you have some volunteers that help write letters that tell them a little bit about the church. And then I would follow up a couple of weeks later with just some more general information. A couple of weeks later, a little bit more. So I'd make a 3 email sequence in the beginning, kind of a little bit about your church. We're glad you're there. And then start checking in every 4 to 6 weeks with them via email or phone if they give you your phone number. And so that is the key thing. So if we think about kind of the 3 steps I've given you today, it's like, here are these key pages. 1 being worship, 2 being here's some next steps, and 3 being let's get the welcome card. And so we're kind of always saying, hey, worship with us online, fill out the welcome card, and then when you're ready, here's a way you can go a next step, like maybe being involved in a Zoom Bible study or being involved with some type of mission opportunity. People love service, especially younger people these days. And that's a good way in to your community. So I keep the invitations simple and then let them over time learn. And as they grow more and more, they'll learn the other opportunities. Individuals beside yourselves will start making invitations to them to be a part of other opportunities. So those are the real key outward focused content. And this is, church, and that's a little bit larger of a church. I'll show you. You can see this is small. This is a little bit smaller church. And you can kind of see here, we have the big worship. You can come in, and right now I could hit play and we could be a part of their worship from this past Sunday. And then when it's live, it shows up here live on Sunday mornings. And then, they have the visit page that we talked about. They have a connect page, which is kind of their next steps, which right now they're doing this Bible study on this Simon Peter book. The about page, the staff page, and then the internal communication, they put most of that under this more button. Some of it's not there, like the give, but they put it there. So just kind of give you two examples. This is rockofAgesLutheran.com, and then AdventNYC. Is that .org or .com? .org, if you want to look at those websites, and we'll send you those links, because I think they're done a little bit different, but I think they're both done fairly well. Especially Advent, because they redid a bunch of stuff just for kind of their COVID time, and they'll probably be redoing that pretty soon, because I know they just started worshiping in the sanctuary again last weekend. All right, so let's go back to my slides real fast, and we'll get to Q&A. We're almost to Q&A. All right, so the welcome card. So like I said, this is one piece of a bigger plan, because there's also, plans about how do we publish content, what type of content, how do we distribute things, how do we connect. So we do have a bigger plan. And so I just want you to know it's a piece of a bigger thing. And if you'd ever like to learn more about that, you can email me at Christopher Harris. This is, I'm sorry, frog in my throat. Okay. So that bigger plan, can help your church have a digital ministry plan that's not overwhelming, help train and implement a team to keep your website and to keep, online worship and things like that going. So if you'd be interested in learning more about that, email me at Christopher@FaithGrowth. That's my first ask. If you'd like to learn more about that and how we might work together to implement the fuller plan in your congregation, email me at Christopher@faithgrowth.com. That's ask number one. Ask number two. So if you'd like to continue this conversation after our training here today, we have a private Facebook group that's church leaders from all over the country that discuss digital ministry 7 days a week. So love for you to come join our Facebook group, bit.ly/FG-FB. So Faith Growth -Facebook, FG-FB, bit.ly/FG-FB. Love for you. Oh, thank you. Virginia just put it in the chat. She's awesome like that. And yeah. And so, yeah, this is the group right there, and we share all kinds of resources. And then my third ask before the Q&A is, we have a podcast, and that podcast is called How We Do Digital Ministry, and it releases every Tuesday. And I discuss with a church leader each Tuesday how they do digital ministry in their context. So it's a way that church leaders can learn from each other. It's a casual conversation of just kind of what's working, what's not working, what lessons learned, and how can we share that, or how can you learn from everybody else. And if you go to faithgrowth.com/podcast, and Virginia just put that link in the chat as well, you can subscribe on either YouTube or your favorite podcast player. And so we'd love to, so that's three asks. If you'd like to learn more about our digital ministry system and how that can be implemented in your church to help you have less stress with all things digital ministry, that this piece that we covered this morning is one part of, email me, Christopher@FaithGrowth. 2, we'd love to have you in our Facebook group. And so go join that. And then 3, subscribe to the podcast. So those are some ways that we can stay in relationship and keep helping you outside of this webinar. But I'm going to stop talking now, and I'm going to answer your questions. So, yes. So Virginia, I know you've been monitoring questions. What do you have for me? And Bob just put a survey link in there in the chat if you would like to give your feedback, because that would be appreciated as well.
Okay, I just had to get unmuted, and here I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Great. Okay, one question. I'll start from when we were talking about photos. What about getting permissions to use the photos? And another person said, will having photos of people doing things require a release?
Good questions. There's two ways I answer this question. First, in a public setting, from a legal standpoint, in a public setting, there is no reasonable expectation of privacy, which means you can take the photos and you can, as long as you took the photos, you can use them. If you did not take the photos, you do actually need the person who took them's permission to use them. But I don't necessarily think that's the best Christian community answer. And so what I kind of suggest is, I suggest more of an opt-out type policy. Once or twice a year, you might say, hey, we take a lot of photos at events, so put this in the newsletter, email newsletter. We take a lot of photos at events and we use those on the website, but we know that there's some reasons that you may prefer that you're not publicly displayed on the website or on Facebook. If that is the case, just let us know, and we keep a list in the office or whatever of people that have requested to not be publicly shown like that. And then you just have that list and you know who's not to be uploaded. And then I would make that request for people to opt out a couple times a year. And you might do it if you're doing back to school stuff and you have kids register for
VBS?
Well, VBS or
Sunday school.
VBS is one, or kids register for Sunday school, or Rally Day or whatever it is. That's a good time to ask parents that, because it is something we want to take into consideration. At my church in Dallas, we have a family that does a lot of foster kids. Those children cannot be on the web for safety reasons. There's, if someone's being harassed or, other type reasons, they're not going to want their pictures online. So to me, it's just a good couple times a year, put it out there. We're just asking you to opt out and then create a list. Is the easiest way to handle it. It's easier than getting permission from every single person every time. And you'll catch the biggest use cases of people that do not want their pictures online. But that's how I would handle that.
Okay, another person, Jill, said, we use the website for event communication, sign up, etc. Should we have two websites, one for outreach and one for internal management?
Well, it's a good question. And I know some people that teach kind of to do an internal portal, if you will, that has all the event communication and do an external website. I would say while I think that makes sense, I generally think most churches don't have the team or the volunteers to manage two sites. And so it's going to be easier to keep it together. And just know that, that's why a lot of times I put some of the more internal communication, which we didn't talk about in this, we put it under that more link, or we might put it in the footer. Something I didn't really show you, on this Advent Lutheran website. If you come down to their footer menu, you see how much is in the footer. So the top is all about the visitor, and the footer is more about people that are already inward communication. So what I would say is, while a second website makes a lot of sense, if you don't really have the team to do it, it's just keep it all in one. It's going to be easier. But yes, I think that's a very good question, and very, very perceptive question as well.
Okay, next question, a couple of questions relating to the welcome cards. Can you give any basics, how-tos on how to create a welcome card?
That's a good question as well. So if you have WordPress, there's a good plugin called Gravity Forms that I use all the time that just lets you build forms. If you're not on WordPress, there's some other, you can use Gravity Forms. But if you're on WordPress, there's a good plugin called Gravity Forms that I use all the time that just lets you build forms. If you're not on WordPress, there's some other, you can use Gravity Forms. But if you're not on WordPress, there's some other there's a tool called Jotform, and there's one called Typeform, and you can go subscribe to it. And I don't know what the fees are. I can't remember these days, but I mean, it's minimal, like $5 a month or something like that. And it'll let you build a form, and then you can link to it. And I mean, even for instance, this one here that Advent Lutheran has, their welcome card, it is technically, I think this is a type form, or actually the first part is on their website. So their website, so here's another little advanced trick I'll show you. Okay, so let me.
Christopher, I know you're typing, but I also just put a link into the chat of our blog post talking about adding a welcome card to your website. And that includes, I believe, links or refers to those plugins that you were talking about just now.
I forgot that we wrote that blog post. Thank you so much. What I was going to say is, yeah, they're using Typeform, and they also have a messed up Typeform. Anyways, I knew that if I submitted that, I'd be able to see what they're using. They're using Typeform. But basically, you just need some type of form software or form plugin for your website that allows you to build the form. And then when they submit, it'll go to somebody's email address. If you're in WordPress, I love Gravity Forms because you can build like contact forms, registration forms, donation forms. You can use Gravity Forms in WordPress to do a lot of other things, including the welcome card. But does that answer your, and then of course, check out that blog post because it goes into a little bit more detail. Thank you, Nancy.
Okay, another question or comment that about some of the website and other automation that goes on behind the scenes. Hang on, let me find it. The auto capture of user actions can now be captured automatically on certain websites. Is that a good idea for a church website, or should it be user generated?
Really boils down to, are you going to use the information? And I don't think a lot of that auto capture stuff, I don't think most churches are advanced enough. I mean, we can teach you how to do that, but it's going to take you, I'd even say it'd take you 12 months to grow into it. So I would say let it be user generated at this point in time, because that's more the advanced level, and you just need to kind of get good at the user generated first. And then we can talk about how to add all those tags and tests and those type of things. I don't know, if that didn't answer your question, add in the chat if you have any more specific.
Okay, another one. Our church recently updated their website, but unfortunately, it still looks like it's from 2008. The person who designed the website is a friend of the church. How can we convince the appropriate congregants that we need to update the website to make it modern and inviting? That is always a challenge.
I don't know. When you figure it out, let me know. This is so hard. Because the people, I mean, what I find most interesting is your church members, by and large, don't really go to the website that much. I mean, they may go occasionally to look at one piece of information, but if you think about where do they spend most of their time, well, it's probably in Facebook like the rest of the world, but, so they have a bad perception of what that is. One of the analogies I sometimes use is it's like the building. Most churches would not want the weeds to start growing. They want the flower beds to look nice and things like that. So we can use the analogy that our church website it is the new front door. And so if it's not kind of new, updated, and inviting like that, then it's similar to if we just had weeds overgrown and paint peeling off the wall. And if you've ever heard, bathrooms are really important that they're clean and pretty for church visitors, so it's like our bathroom hasn't been cleaned in a while. So that could be one analogy. Two is that when we're online, where are people spending their time? And even asking some of the key people at your church, well, what websites do you like? And, if they say, well, I'm on Facebook a lot. Well, okay. So, how does our website compare to Facebook? So that's not quite a fair comparison because, Facebook spends millions of dollars a year, but just getting them to realize that, like, people have higher expectations based on the sites that they spend their time on. You know what I mean? And so while you cannot build the next Facebook and there's no reason for you to do it, we need to up our game just a little bit. And so maybe the building analogy is a little bit better. The other thing is the web, and helping them really start to learn that the website is not for us. We get to use it, and it helps us do some internal communication, but it's really for potential visitors and for connecting with other people. And so we're trying to build it for them and not for us. And so what's good enough for us may not be good enough for our potential visitors. But I think it's just more of a conversation. I get it. It's a hard conversation. I mean, what I find frustrating sometimes when helping churches with websites is most churches pay more for their Xerox machine than they will their website, which I find very interesting because we're moving away from paper. Because most churches also don't understand how big of a tool it can be. It's like, okay, let's just get something up there and forget about it. And it's like, well, as we're really moving, and like a next step that I would want to get y'all into is like, how are we publishing content every week or a couple times a week that really is sharing the message of Jesus Christ to help connect with people? That's more advanced training. But when we start looking at our website as a tool for that, as opposed to just a brochure, then we can get people excited about maybe spending a little more money. But it's a slow conversation. And quite frankly, and I think it will be a little bit easier post-pandemic because most people had to go online for all parts of their lives. And so they just get that everything is online. And yeah, those are my thoughts on that. I don't know. Anybody else have thoughts on how to share that? How to help convince people that they need to do better websites? Put them in the comments because I'm sure some of y'all have good ideas as well. Anyway, Virginia.
Okay. Yep. I have a couple more questions. What is a recommended website building platform?
My favorite is WordPress. And the reason that I love WordPress is because it's an open source software. And it powers 40% of the internet right now. So 40% of the websites on the internet are run by WordPress, which means there's a ton of people that know WordPress and a lot of places to get help. If you go type WordPress help into YouTube, there's over 1 million help videos. There are actual physical books published on WordPress that you could go check out of your local library. So the resources are the best for WordPress. It's fairly easy to use, whereas a lot of the other platforms are proprietary or they're just smaller. I mean, you're not going to find books published about most of the other platforms that you can check out of your library. And maybe only a couple hundred videos on Facebook. So I'm a big fan of WordPress.
Okay. What about the privacy of internal information, prayer requests? How should people handle that in relation to their website? Maybe, or social media. I can think of a social media application there.
Yeah. Well, I think it's, current. So if you were to get the prayer request offline, how would you handle it right now? Do you ask them, hey, may I include this in the prayers of the people? Do you ask them, what are you doing right now? And then we'll figure out what that looks like online. Because you could have a prayer form online and you could ask those same questions. Is it okay if we pray for you on Sunday? Or should this be confidential with just the pastor? Can we give this to our prayer chain? Or should, once again, should be confidential with the pastor? So I mean, number one, we empower them with their data, and then we deal with that. So add that to your prayer forms, and then I think, quite honestly, we don't share prayer requests online unless, from the church. I mean, unless it's like in the prayers of the people on Sunday morning, which is going to be live streamed. I think that, maybe if you have a private Facebook group and that individual would like to ask everybody in the Facebook group to be praying for them, that's different than you coming in and saying, unless you have specific permission, like, hey, is it okay if I mention this in our private Facebook group? And they say yes. So to me, it's about asking and then executing on that. And if we have an online form, we can put little, tick boxes, this is private with the pastor only. Share, it's okay to share with the prayer chain, okay to have in Sunday morning worship. And then if there's like on Facebook or other things like that, I would really prefer them initiate it, asking for those prayers. But occasionally, maybe they're in the hospital or something like that, so it's not feasible for them. You could ask, is it okay if I share it in our group? And then I would just get explicit permission to do that. But that's how I would handle that. And if anybody else has any good ideas on handling prayer requests online, throw them in the chat box. I see you're muted again, Virginia. Is there any other questions? All right, just found the chat box. Let's see.
Okay, sorry, I muted myself and then I was stuck in the mute. Okay.
Stuck in the internet, everybody.
There is something else. Let me see. What type of analytics should the church collect?
That's a good one. I would start basic, because there's millions of analytics and there's not really much you can do with it until you get regular. So I would start just like you do weekly, you count how many people were there. I would look at your analytics weekly. How many people visited the site in the last 7 days? And then what were the key pages that they visited? And then that's just where I would start. And Virginia will tell you that's exactly what we look at on our website. And then occasionally, just looking at that leads us to ask other questions like, oh my gosh, normally we only have 130 visitors. Where did these 1,000 visitors come from this last week? And so we dig in deeper and realize it was a robot hitting our website. So to me, the important thing is that you just start small and you need to look at it consistently. And then over time, you'll kind of start growing into other areas you want to know. But the first two questions are, what are my weekly visitors to the website as a whole? And then what are the top 3 pages that are being visited? And what's going on there? Now, how do you get analytics on there? You can add Google Analytics to your website, or if you're using WordPress, Jetpack has analytics. There's a couple, you don't have to use Google Analytics, because Google Analytics is nice, but it's very it's not that user friendly. It's kind of hard to learn. And Jetpack for WordPress is probably a little bit easier, and especially when you're just looking at like how many visitors this last week and what were the top pages. And I would encourage you to add that to your weekly reports when you're looking at worship attendance and other type of attendance and stuff. Know what your weekly web stats were, but just start simple and then kind of grow into it.
Okay, another question. How valuable is live streaming, and how do I encourage the congregation to agree to it?
Good question. I have about 3 different answers for this. So to me, okay, 2 things. It is, in the online world, it's really more about content creation, we like to say. So where I kind of helped you today is, okay, let's lay this website foundation that then allows us to start connecting. And then the next step I would even say after that is we have to be creating content that's not come to this ice cream social, which that might be nice. It's like, here's what this faith is. Here's what we're a subject matter expert in. We're a subject matter expert in this man, Jesus Christ, and how he transforms lives and heals people. And then as a result, we're called out into the world to serve others and to love our neighbors. And we want you to come join us in that mission. And so we want to share content around that, not just like all these activities come to us. And so live streaming is a big, because the primary way that we create content right now as a church is worship. So live streaming helps you have a key piece of content every week, which helps you spread that message and helps you connect with more people and allows them to like literally work, allows when they're online worship to become a verb, because they can do it right now when they hit that play button. All that said, live streaming is hard and it can be expensive. And what I think we're going to see over the next year is we're going to see some churches that are doing it right now stop doing it because it's hard. And we're going to see some churches start doing it. And everybody's kind of exploring I guess what I should say is what we're going to see in the next year is everybody exploring how to do it well and what's going to work. And I don't know the best answers there. I know some of the cautions where I've been live streaming, and I helped set up live streaming in 2012 at my congregation in Dallas. And what we set up in 2012, post-pandemic, doesn't work anymore. Because what we set up in 2012 was basically just cameras at the very back of the sanctuary. And so what we put forward is a worship experience that is just somebody observing, not really worshiping. When we were outside of our sanctuaries and we couldn't worship outside of our sanctuaries, everybody got online like this. And so the pastor was this close to the camera, and he or she is talking straight to you, preaching to you. And now if we go back into our sanctuaries and we put that pastor in a pulpit, where's the camera going to be? How do we really bring them in? Or if you happen to a good conversation about this, and this is a shameless plug for the podcast, How We Do Digital Ministry. This last Tuesday, we released an episode with Pastor Rich Hong, and he had a great analogy. He says it's like baseball. When we have to start thinking about worship like this, when we're live streaming, when you go to the baseball game, you have one experience. You have a limited field of vision, but you smell the peanuts. You got people next to you. You got all those games they play in between innings, and the take me out to a ballpark that you sing in the 7th inning stretch. That type of experience. You see the game, you see the players, you hear the crack of the bat, and you're having a very good experience of baseball. Then you can also watch baseball on home, and now you're going to get close-ups. You're going to get lots of different angles. You're going to get commentary. You're going to get replays. So it is the same event, but there's different ways to experience it that allows you to be engaged in different ways and still have a great time. And so the question about live streaming is, I think it makes great content for you, but I think we're going to spend the next year figuring out the best ways to do it. And I'm not sure the best ways to do it. I do think that there's probably 3 things to consider. And one is, as you're thinking about doing worship online, I know some churches that have decided really not to live stream, and they're just recording maybe a 15, 20-minute online service that they're going to keep doing. And instead of doing it maybe in the sanctuary, they're going to do it, maybe turn a Sunday school room into a studio type setup, but it allows them to still have this intimacy. Then there's some churches like the church in New York that I've been going to, they're playing with how do we do live stream, not only just putting out what's happening in the sanctuary, but bringing people in from outside the sanctuary. So how are we doing live worship where maybe one of our readers is at home, and so we're bringing them into the sanctuary as well as sending things out of the sanctuary. And then the third way is just, hey, we're sending things out, but how do we maybe, instead of all the music being live, maybe some of the music is pre-recorded, maybe there's different segments, if you will, kind of like the baseball analogy that are going out. And I know that all kind of blows your mind, but I think that's what we have to be thinking about when it comes to live stream. But at the core, as far as what I really want you to be doing week in and week out, is that you have to be producing some type of content online. And the worship service is an easy way to do that, and it's an easy way to connect. And you're inviting people 24/7 that they can come worship with you. So I don't know if that really answers your question, because it gives you a lot of things to consider. But there's some inexpensive ways to get started. I would just kind of that's even the church I helped. We got started inexpensive, and then we just kind of kept growing on and on to that. But when you talked about convincing your congregation, it's important. To me, it's like, it's a way that you can connect with the people that are not here. And if all you care about worshiping are the people are here, then we're never going to connect with people outside of here. And so it's like, you have to get them excited about, this is an easy way we can connect with people who aren't here and begin to invite them to be a part of us. And if that doesn't get them excited, then I think y'all might have some other issues to consider as far as mission and outreach are concerned. Because it's like, this is an easy way that we can take what we do right now and begin to share that with others. And we learned some lessons during pandemic, and the church as a whole is struggling with this and giving it. Our church right now, there's the open door grants, The ELCA is making money available for churches as they're coming back into sanctuaries. And some of that could be used, okay, we're coming back, how can we keep doing our online? So churches are even finding money and making it available through grants to help with this right now. So anyways, I think this is an easy way that we can share it out. And then kind of the bigger conversation that we're having through our podcast and through the church as a whole, how are we going to do this well and what can we learn from each other? And that's just going to be trial and error over the next year. Hopefully that was helpful. I got on a soapbox there, sorry. As you can tell, I love talking about this stuff. So, and I'm grateful for all of you that are still here. Jean put in here that she uses Google Forms to collect their online content card. That's one I forgot to mention. And Google Forms will go straight into a Google spreadsheet. So it's real nice if you want to use Google Forms.
This is a little bit related to the live streaming and online worship that you were just talking about. Somebody asked, should we treat a web service just like a low budget TV broadcast, not try to be NBC, ABC, etc.?
Well, I mean, I agree, because we're not going to be NBC, ABC, but we have to just make sure that we're not just putting the viewer, how do we engage the worshiper online? Has to be the question. I don't think we have to spend tons of money on it. I don't think it has to be as polished as baseball, even though I was using that example. But it has to be engaging. And if it's just we kind of set a camera up in the back of the room, that's not engaging. I kind of like the church that I'm attending right now. I mean, they're playing with this because they have online greeters and things like they got into pandemic and they were doing worship well because they were in New York, and in New York, like you couldn't even have 2 people in the sanctuary. So they had to figure out how to live stream from apartments. And so then they learned how that they could have a leadership team all over the place. And so there's this intimacy that was developed. And now it's like, okay, we're going to go back into this space, the sanctuary. How do we keep that intimacy? And I know what they are trying is that there's still going to be online greeters as well as greeters in person. There's just, that it becomes, to do it well and to engage, you're going to have some elements that you think about specific for online that you may not be doing in person, and vice versa. So maybe 5-10 minutes before the service, you have online greeters that are, and this could be in a Sunday school classroom. This could be at their houses. I guess what I'm saying is you're probably going to have somebody producing worship for online and somebody kind of producing worship for inside the sanctuary is ultimately probably what will end up happening. But it doesn't, you just have to think about how are we engaging both these people? And we kind of take it for granted because they're sitting 5 feet in front of us when we're in the sanctuary. I mean, that's what we thought about, and we have the wonderful rubrics and all this, and it's really about how do we engage these people and how, the whole structure and the whole liturgical tradition is about worshiping this God, but we kind of take it for granted that they're having a good experience because they're just sitting there. And online, we just have to make sure, because there is a way that they can just be passive, that we're including them in such a way that they are worshiping and not consuming. Can you describe how they do the online greeters? Yeah. Hi, welcome. I'm glad you're here. Now, so they do it on Facebook, and you know how you can chat in the Facebook. So they're just welcoming everybody that says hi on Facebook. And then they have some pre-questions specifically, like, hey, this is the scripture today. And so there's usually maybe a question they'll just ask everybody, who was like, I can't remember, like, who was I can't even think of a good example, but usually there's like a question, and then they do some of the announcements. They talk about some of the logistics. If we get cut off, here's what to do. There's a link to they talk about the welcome card. They talk about next steps. They talk about, so there's a script that they kind of go through 2 or 3 times, but they're also monitoring the chat and saying hello to everybody that says hello in the chat. And they're encouraging people to start chatting in the chat. And that's their kind of key thing that the greeters do. And they come on about 5 minutes before the service goes live. And then when the service goes live, it goes to the pastor. And a lot of times she says a lot of the same things, but now this is to catch the people that were running late because a lot of people show up late, as we know. Yeah, and usually for us, that would be, when I'm looking, somebody just said, how engaged are online visitors? If you engage them, you can get them engaged. And then the services I've been a part of, there's usually hundreds of messages throughout the whole service, but it usually takes that you have one or two people keyed up to do it. So if we start sharing the piece, you have one or two people that are ready to start sharing the piece with everybody in the comments. You say, hey, we'd love for you to put your prayer request in the comments as we do the prayers for the people. You have one or two people keyed up that are going to start putting some prayer requests in there, or start praying for some of the requests that are put in there by other people. So it's kind of that, have a plan and you have some plants, if you will. Well, not really plants. Think about them as ushers. It's now the online ushers. They're helping people have a better worship experience by giving them guidance. And so we have the greeters that are online. We have maybe some ushers that are helping with that conversation. So in a lot of ways, it's roles we're familiar with. It's just they're doing a little bit different job now. But the goal of that role is the same. And so, to me, that's what's so exciting. The end goals are all the same. The technology is just asking us to do it a little bit different, but our goals are the same. We want people to encounter the living Christ, to know that they are loved and they're accepted for who they are at this moment in time, not who they may become. And we want to help them experience that and help them share that with others. And so those are our big goals. The technology has not changed that. And a lot of the roles that we've found over the years that facilitate that, the technology has not changed that. It's just tweaked a little different. And we don't have 200 years plus of experience to rely on in our tradition. We're all co-creating it together, brand new. But the goals and the roles, I think, are very similar. We just have to adapt and figure out what does that look like in the digital context. I can keep going. Give me your questions. You can unmute yourselves if you don't want to type it, because I know people have dropped off. It's probably fine if you wanted to unmute yourself and ask a question.
Yeah, I've given everybody the opportunity to unmute themselves now, so feel free to jump in.
I'll start showing pictures of my dog in a second. So, who actually, my dog is asleep right at my feet, and she has been very good today. And I'm excited because some days she's not very good. Somebody just typed, let's see, how to engage online visitors. I also have the pastor address the viewers online. That's a very good idea. It's like, you got to talk to that camera at different points of the service. And, really like, hi there, love that you're here today, get in there. But it's a big difference if I'm way back over here, or if I come over here and pet my dog, and so that's what we're going to have to learn.
Yeah, that's Christopher, key piece I think we talked about several times in our group in the past about, kind of planning what the shots are and making sure that some of the people, even if you're in your sanctuary, the pastor is able to be right up to the camera. The reader.
Somebody else's dog came to play too. You should know that my dog just poked her head up when she heard that. Yeah, those shots. I used to teach people to run the cameras at our church, and so I would literally take a bulletin from Sunday and write all the shots that they needed. Because a lot of it is where is the action normally, and then how do we get a good shot of that? And always thinking when you're running those cameras 1 to 2 items ahead in the ordo. So and then where do I need that camera to be, and then how can I get the best angle that allows the people at home to really be immersed in it and not just at the back kind of watching. Somebody has a really good question here that I have a strong opinion on. Do you have any good ideas for including offering online? And so, well, the first thing is just to ask and make a strong ask. And the reason I say that is we've gotten so used to those offering plates that we pass around that we've forgotten how that's a huge ask. On Sunday morning when we're inside there and we say, okay, we say something nice and wonderful, like, return to God what God has first given you, or, something, we have wonderful little sayings that are of the scripture that talk about stewardship, that invite them to give. But then we have these people come around and say, now I want you to pass this thing around, and you're going to see all the money everybody else gave. And we better, so you better think twice about not putting something in here. That's what goes through some people's head. That's not what we intend. But I'm just saying it's a very big ask when we actually pass those plates around. And so the secondary thing is we have to be that clear online in that. Usually, almost the beginning and at the offertory and at the end, I would give them an opportunity to give. And I would tell them, either one or two ways, just go to xyz.give and fill it in now. Or if you have text to give, I would, flash up slides on the screen that say text whatever to whatever to give now, or go here right now. Go fill it out right now. We're going to be listening to this wonderful, we have an offertory from the choir today. We're going to play that. And while we're doing that, hop over on your other tab in your browser and make your offering today. I mean, we're going to get that specific of here's how you can do it. And we're kind of expecting you to do it right now, not in a manipulative, not in a cold way, but just in a way realizing that we can't just have a link somewhere and give and expect it to happen. And kind of even thinking when we pass the plate, that is a big ask, actually. It's done in a nonverbal way, but it's a very big ask. And so we need to do something similar online, very politely. Here's how you do it. And then kind of now's the time to do it. So that is kind of my thoughts, that I don't think we're comfortable yet asking just directly. It's oh, there's a give button on our website. That's the kind of stuff we're saying right now. There's a give. Yeah, you can just go to our website and you can donate. No, I right now, here on this slide, there's a link, click that. Or we just put a link in the comments, click that, or text, whatever, right now. Okay, I'm going to give you a minute to do that. I'm going to go sit down and we'll listen to this choir piece or whatever, this musical offering. So it's not just, hey, when you get a chance, go do it. No, I want you to do it now. And here's how you do it right now. Very politely, of course. But that's how we do the offering online.
I had another
Sure.
question that came to me directly. It's, would Zoom be a possibility for congregational interaction for worship services?
It's okay, it's a little bit harder for first-time guests, so I kind of say do both and what I find, here's the interesting thing that you can even have more fun with. You can do Zoom. Some churches did the whole worship on Zoom while they're out this summer. While they were out for COVID. But also Zoom will let you broadcast into Facebook and some other things like that. So you could use Zoom as a place that's kind of like the sanctuary, if you will. And then there could be the main, if I was the main leader, that's kind of what's coming out of Zoom. And so we have something for those first time until they ask for the Zoom link, because, it's a little bit higher barrier to get the Zoom link and get in. The other interesting thing, and I've seen churches do both way. I don't know, he just wrote the book, Lenny Duncan, that's what they do at their church. It's online and on YouTube, but they do have a community that gathers and participates in Zoom. You just have to request the Zoom link, but it's out there on YouTube for everybody. And then, hey, I'm ready to take the next step and want to visit with other people, I will do that. Same thing with that Advent New York that I just did. They have interesting, it's on, the main one is on Facebook, and there's some people that just totally participate there, but there's some people that wanted the next level of interaction. So there's a smaller subgroup that participate, that together watches that in Zoom, so they can all chat and greet one another. And then even before you could gather in person, they were doing park groups. When it was safe to go outside, different groups were meeting and watching the stream together in person. So that's where we can get creative. That's with online, there's lots of ways we can go and start accommodating more people. But I think Zoom is perfectly fine in a good way, so people online can really see each other and interact. But I'd want you to be broadcasting some of it out of there through another thing. So first-time visitors, if you will, can interact with your service and see it. and it's not, because I will say kind of showing up to a Zoom webinar for the first time with all these faces looking at you is a high bar. And so you want to give people a way to get comfortable with your community before they do that. But I do think Zoom would work well. Yeah, and then Barbara's saying they record it and put it on their website. So that's the other thing. If you have Zoom, you can always post it later as well. And they use Zoom to, to have multiple leaders leading. But yeah, Zoom is cool. And there's even a group on Facebook that I'm not a member of that talks tips and tricks for leading worship in Zoom. And I cannot remember the name of it right off, but I know it's led by a Presbyterian pastor in California, Bruce Reyes Chow. He has a group on Zoom hybrid worship where they just talk about best practices for worship in Zoom. If you were to go to Facebook and search for Bruce Reyes Chow, like either hybrid worship or Zoom worship, you'll be able to find that group. And that would be a place to get you some tips on doing Zoom worship.
I think that was all the questions that came through.
Awesome. I was just over here. I just pulled up Facebook because I was going to search for that group, but and we can put the link in the Bruce Reyes Chow Zoom. Let's see what comes up. Group, places, groups. Oh, well, I can't find it right now. I'll add it with the links that I'm going to send to Bob later with like this. So I'm going to send you some, I'll have Bob send y'all a resource on, like we have a worksheet for writing the content. We have a worksheet for choosing photos. And so I'll have Bob send that to y'all. Remember that just in summation, subscribe to the podcast, and especially if you want to go listen to Richard's from this past week, from Tuesday, all about baseball and worship and baseball. So faithgrowth.com podcast. Love for you to join the private Facebook group, bit.ly FG-FB. And you can go join that. And if Virginia likes you, she'll let you in. That's a joke. It's just she's the one that lets people in. And then if you'd like to learn more about maybe how we could work together and help your church, email me at Christopher@faithgrowth, and we'll talk about that. And we're going to be making some big announcements about a summer program later today on Facebook. And so if you're in the Facebook group, you'll get to see that. That's all. Unless there's any other questions, but no, thank y'all so much for having me. I appreciate being with you, the Southeastern Pennsylvania Synod. Thank you.